Everybody, and welcome to the second week of Junior Seminar. This week, we're going to be talking about how to do program notes. Very important skill. I made my living doing program notes. When I was an assistant conductor, it was most of my job. I lectured for the New York Philharmonic too, which is just spoken program notes. So program notes is something you're going to do. And you're going to want to do this anyway because our audiences are ignorant. They always have been. They don't go to music school. And so they don't know the music you're doing. They may not know the styles. They don't know the traditions. And if you want them to enjoy it, not after 45 listenings on a recording, but right there at your concert, you're going to have to tell them something about the music. So program notes are really an important thing, and there's a way you can make some money down the line. But even if you become an amateur at this and go on to a career in something entirely different, those program notes are still important if you want your audience to appreciate what you do. So let's talk about it. The first thing is when you write your program notes, don't write from the point of view of what you want to say. Nobody cares. Write from the point of view of what the audience needs to hear to be able to enjoy the music. Do they need to know something's in sonata form? Every highfalutin program note writer has to start sonata form. I'm not sure an audience needs that. They can't follow it anyway. Do they need to know that this is your favorite piece on earth? Absolutely not. They don't care. What they need to know is, what am I supposed to listen for? What tradition is it in? Is it supposed to make me cry or smile? Or is it, what do I have to listen for to understand this piece? That's what you have to tell them. Now, how do you get there? Well, the first thing is you have to do a bunch of research, right? The first research is know the piece. I mean, you play the piece, you sing the piece, so you know the piece. So that's your first thing. The score tells you a lot. Your teacher tells you a lot. So you gather information. Wikipedia tells you a lot. And don't scoff at Wikipedia. It's a surprisingly good source. But there are really other great sources. There are books, for example, of all the string chamber music that you can ever think of. They have program notes or descriptions of all of it. These volumes, they cost a fortune, but they're in the libraries. They have that for singing. They might have all the soprano arias or all the soprano arias by Verdi or all the art songs of Schubert. These books exist. Don't be afraid to look them up. A lot of good information in there. Lots of good information. Also, the Groves Dictionary of Music, which is now a 30-some volume encyclopedia. And if you could speak some other languages, even better yet is Music and Geschichte and Gegenwart, a great big huge encyclopedia out of Germany. But I don't expect you to use that. So you get this information, and then you say, all right, how do I write good program notes? And by the way, you don't have to footnote any of this. Footnotes are considered common knowledge. Nothing has to be cited unless you take word for word someone's translation, and then you just have to credit the person, say translation by so and so. So you don't need footnotes, but you have to do a little research, and then you have to figure out your style. So style means a lot of things. And by the way, I've got PowerPoint of all of this, not in this order. The PowerPoint's in a different order, but it's also uploaded to Canvas. Make sure you look at the PowerPoint. There's things in there I'm not talking about, and things, and vice versa. Okay, so we're talking about style. The first thing is how are you going to list your pieces? Do you put pieces in quote marks? Do you put them in italics? And there is some universally accepted rules. Things like symphony number 9, nothing, no italics, no quotes. If it's a generic word, we don't. But a name like King Lear, you put that in italics. If you have an aria from King Lear, you put the aria in quotes, any excerpt. Usually, vocal music, you punctuate it the same way it's punctuated in the text, if you're taking it for the first line of the text. But in most other things, you capitalize all the nouns or all the important words. There's lots of different ways to do it. And there are manuals on this, and I've linked to one of the best ones. So you can just look it up. They'll give you the answers right there. But you have to be consistent. That's also true of spelling. Prokofiev, when I was growing up, was spelled with 2 F's at the end. It's now spelled with a V at the end. It used to be Peter Tchaikovsky. Now it's usually Piotr, Piotr. So make sure you know what's in vogue in the composing world, what their names are, and then be consistent. Consistency is all that really matters. Any style sheet works. Once you've done that, you have to also think about how you're going to lay out the program notes. Now, for your senior recital, you're probably just going to write one paragraph, just going to write about the piece. You might write a paragraph about the composer and a paragraph about the piece. 3 sentences in each one, but you might want to do that. If you're doing fancy program notes, then the forms can be pretty complicated. Like it could have the composer and then a bio of the composer, then the orchestration of the piece, and the last time the piece was performed on the West Coast. Then it could be 4 paragraphs. It could have the history of the piece and the description of the piece. And the only way to figure out what format you really want is to look at program notes. So I've linked, first of all, the San Francisco Symphonies, but there's also a link later in your PowerPoint presentation that takes you to a page that's got like 8 or 9 of them. And I also sent you the Peabody School, which is part of Johns Hopkins, but Peabody School of the Great Conservatories has a section on how to do program notes and how to do the formatting. So when you get it figured out, that whether you do one paragraph or 2 paragraphs, you can talk about the composer or the piece or the history. Again, you want consistency. And by the way, you can put translations in there also. That's part of program notes. But here's one thing you should never put in there: first person stuff. Why is this? Well, if you say, Beethoven wrote this piece for his immortal beloved, and it's a piece of great passion and beauty, that's statement of fact. And the audience is going to read that and say, oh, okay, unless they think you're wrong, in which case they will go and do research and find out if you're right or wrong. But if you say, I think this piece is beautiful, and they listen and say, well, I didn't think it was beautiful, so you must be dumb. I mean, why would you do that? You want to write about the music. When you write about yourself, you open yourself up to attack, and you tell the audience that everything in your program notes is opinion, that there's no fact there. That's how they'll see it. If you want them to read this and say, oh, this is what the piece is about, no first person. Leave it out. Save that for your memoirs. Okay, write as simply as you can. I have an example of that in the PowerPoint. Just always write simply, as few adjectives as you can, direct words, powerful words, words that say exactly what you mean. You'll see the example. You get the idea. And we talked about sources a little bit. I'd like to talk for a second about translations. So a lot of times, singers or even people who have a piece that have some text associated will put a translation in the program. Very important. Audiences can't follow if they don't have a translation. But oftentimes we just cut and paste what's called a singer's translation. And a singer's translation is when they try to match the syllables to match the same syllables in the music. And sometimes they have to change the meaning of the words. For example, there's a famous song which is Ich liebe dich. Ich liebe dich. Well, that just means I love you. And dich is the familiar form of you. So it's really very familiar. It's I love you. Not I love you, mama, or I love you, teacher. I love you intimately. Ich is I, liebe is love, and dich is a familiar you. Now, the way it's always translated for singing is I love thee now. Now, thee is the familiar form of you, except we don't use it anymore. It's archaic. We think of it as biblical language. So I love thee now sounds like you're talking to God and you're speaking about this moment. But the song is talking to a lover, and it's universal. Ich liebe dich and I love thee now do not mean the same thing. And if you just take that singing translation and stick it in the program, your audience will misunderstand the song. By the way, if that's how you think of the song, you'll misunderstand it too. But you may have a better translation. Now, the really good word-for-word translations are often incomprehensible. Word order is different in these languages. Some of the Verdi stuff is just nutty, archaic, poetic, incomprehensible. So they're usually translations that are as close as you can get to being word for word, but still sound like English. Those are the ones you want. You can do it yourself if you know the language or if you trust Google Translate, or you can get it if you cite it. And I would just check it out by taking a few lines and putting it in Google Translate and seeing how many liberties they took if you're not good at the language. But you really want to know word for word, and you should have that stuff anyway. So I think those are basically all the things for writing program notes. I went through them really, really fast. Writing program notes is not easy because you have to write well, you have to research well, you have to write very compact language, you have to think entirely of your audience and what they need, but it's an important skill and is part of your senior projects. So your assignment for next week, write program notes for 1 or 2 of the songs you picked from your program. All right, I look forward to reading what you've got to say. Thank you and have a great week.